We put the...
Now, your marks have to be in front of the refrigerator, back up, so you can't get your hair in front of the rabbit. Let's start inching our way through it.
And we're still off to go back.
I thought it was a really interesting idea for a movie. A detective story with a irascible rabbit named Roger. And it just I said, this is a movie that I'd like to go out and see, but this is a movie that we're not going to exactly see overnight. This is going to take years to make. This is not going to be inexpensive. It's going to take a long time. But if done right, it could be, I don't want to say breakthrough, because but it could be something that no one's ever seen before.
The Roger experience took so long that there were many times when the movie almost was destroyed because we had too much time to tinker and too much time to think.
When Bob challenged the animators who said, here we got all these rules about what you can do and not do with the camera, Bob said, look, I'm going to shoot this movie just like a regular movie, and you guys figure out how to put the tunes in it.
It was a real leap of faith on Bob Zemeckis' part, and kind of brave on his part when you think back about it, as he was shooting this elaborate Invisible Man movie, and with the trust that his team would pull it off later.
There wasn't that much confidence that we were going to deliver on time. You know, and that was the worry. You know, you had to make every shot count.
Technologically, yeah, it was a challenge to everybody, and I had no idea, you know, how difficult my part was going to be in it.
I'm not sure it was ever greenlit. It was always sitting there about to be canceled at every moment, as I remember. Every day we had to sweat it out.
We were flying blind. There was no way in real time to know that the actions you were performing on the set were perfect.
And so we would just go, yeah, let's do it. And it would be horribly hard later, but we'd just go ahead and try it. The worst that could happen is that we fail.
Before we started, we of course all had questions. Could it be done with the style that we had envisioned? And so the answer was a test.
Well, the test was essentially to prove to Disney and Amblin, I guess, that the movie could be done and have a certain look to it that you would believe. You'd believe Roger was in the shot with an actor.
Interaction is the key. You see that the comedians like Laurel and Hardy are constantly all tied up together. So he said, well, I remember, I think I said, have the rabbit run down. The guy walks down some stairs, the live actor, and then the rabbit follows him. And the rabbit is clumsy anyway, so he crashes into some boxes at the bar, or tin cans.
Roger, what the hell are you doing here?
I need a place to hide. I'm in trouble, Eddie.
Then why'd you run?
You haven't noticed. I'm a rabbit.
Right. And you're not gonna get away from me again. This time, are you?
Of course not, Eddie. I would never...
I wish there was some way that thing could be in the film, because when we saw that the first time, we were like going, what is that? You know, this is going to be fun.
I remember when it was done, we showed it to the executives at the studio, and they were like, well, what is that? Is it like a guy in a rabbit suit?
And it was, in fact, I think the thing that thoroughly convinced Disney that we were going to be off on this great journey that, you know, looked like it was going to be possible.
It was clear that all the elements to do this trick, or novelty combination, they were all existing. Of how to do backlighting, how to make the arms look round with little mats. And we just thought, oh, gee, well, all we have to do is put the pieces together, you see? The problem is not going to be how to do it. The problem is going to be time and money.
Shortly before we started production, all the key people went up to ILM, and we sat down in the conference room and put our heads together about how we're going to pull this movie off and what our respective jobs were and what our needs were from the other people, you know, doing the special effects, doing the animation. So we had this meeting, we thrashed the whole movie out and what our needs were, and then we flew back to Los Angeles But all I remember after that meeting is being in the San Francisco airport and having this gigantic headache and thinking, how are we ever going to pull this off?
Well, actually, it was 3 elaborate movies in one. It was a period film noir live-action movie. It was a feature-length animated movie, and it was a special effects movie.
Door opens. And cut.
Cut! Baby Herman, you were perfect. You're better than perfect.
Wait. Okay, so
line.
wait, you got to get his line in. Okay, so and cut. Now, all right, let's figure this out. If he comes in,
Bob actually approached the filming of the movie not unlike the way he would shoot any movie, which means he would block the scene as if the cartoon character were there.
There was this sort of rule that you can never move the camera when you're doing animation, which I never understood who made up that rule.
And he said, well, why do these other animation directors say you can't? And I said, because they're lazy. You know, I mean, we're supposed to be able to turn things in every direction. That's our job. So you can shoot your movie and we'll just fit the character in. He said, well, isn't that a lot of work? Yeah, twice as much work.
and action.
The first take was always a walkthrough carrying these large rubber dummies of Roger Rabbit and the Weasels. And that would place the camera move and set up the pacing and staging of the shot.
7J, take 1, reference.
Okay, quiet, we're rolling. And action.
Oh, boys, didn't hear you come in.
I said, where's the rabbit?
You mean the one with the orange pants and the big floppy ears and the buck teeth and the clodhopper feet?
Yeah.
Haven't seen him.
Cut.
121J, take 9, reference.
So when Bob Hoskins was there or Joanna Cassidy, they needed something to focus on, some reference point, because they're just looking to thin air. And they had the puppet there, they had the dummy right there on the set.
Does this help?
They would then take the dolls out and shoot the scene without the dolls, and then check them to see if the eye lines were the same.
Does this help?
Yeah, thanks. Do you mean to tell me that you could have taken your hand out of that cuff at any time?
No, not at any time. Only when it was funny.
I've seen other shows that have live-action animation combination, and the people aren't looking at them at all. And you can tell, even if they're looking at them, it looks like they're looking through them, not looking at them. It looks like they're looking into dead space, only at the same eye line.
Right.
So I'm looking at his eyes there.
And then you just drop him to throw the plate, and then back up to that level. Right. No.
We also put the actors in mime training so that they could learn how to, say, actually, like Bob Hoskins could learn how to pick up the rabbit by the neck and learn how to, you know, make it look like there was weight in his hand and have his hand put around mass and that sort of thing. You know, it was a lot of work.
Roger!
Yeah! That's you, sis!
Let's get out of here! What are you waiting for?
No damn key!
The rabbit and myself are going to be in the shot at the same time, all the way through. So I've got to be focused on that rabbit all the way through the shot.
Come on, Eddie. You're my only hope. Open up in the name of the law.
How'd you do that? Because you hold your hand up like that and focus on it, then take it away. Immediately your eyes open up to focus, and it's obvious that you're not focused.
What are we gonna do?
What's all this we stuff? They just want the rabbit.
You can't lose sight of the fact that the thing that makes the animation interaction work is his side of the performance. It's him believing that the rabbit is really there. All the special effects in the world wouldn't work without his performance.
Remember, you never saw me.
Get out of there!
when he picks a rabbit up, you can feel 60 pounds of weight in his hand, even though there's nothing there. And the way in which he is focused on a place in space, there's never any doubt that he's got that rabbit right there in his hand. And, you know, and he'll turn away and he'll talk and he'll turn back to the rabbit and he still finds exactly the same place in space every time. So whatever it was some particular thing that he knew how to do, but really nobody else could do.
We're supposed to be hiding. What's wrong with you?
What's wrong with you? You're the only person in the theater that isn't laughing. Is there nothing that can permeate your impervious puss?
Well, every time we saw dailies, it was like watching an Invisible Man movie because, you know, you had this actor looking at nothing and a voice coming from off camera in every single shot.
A tune killed my brother.
A tune? No.
That's right, a tune.
We had actors, real actors, not just the script supervisor or stand-ins, but we cast American actors in London to be the voices, and they would be there and they would give us real-time, you know, full performances.
Roger, say something.
Look, stars. Better when you are, Raoul. Ooh.
Bob Hoskins and I would rehearse as though we were two actors in any movie. Then I would step off camera into this little place that they had sectioned off for me with my own mic and watch whatever happened. Because if Hoskins were to pull Roger, I would have to react to that. I came to call it trans-projectional acting, so that whatever he was doing, I would watch it and I would project myself into that space. After a while, it just felt very natural.
The guy who was doing Roger, who was with me all the time, was Charlie Fleischer, who is completely nuts. He, like the first day, he insisted on a costume. He said, Charlie, you're a voice. If I said anything about your character, no, but, you know.
I'm a rabbit. 3 years of acting school, and I'm a rabbit. Shakespeare, and I'm a rabbit. You figure it out.
They had made Roger's clothes up to fit Charlie, and Charlie, to be in character, wore Roger's clothes. And I thought to myself, if they think I'm wearing a diaper, they've got another thing coming. There's no way I'm walking around on a set with a diaper on.
Well, I've just approached this like I would approach any role. I don't consider this to be a voiceover. If anything, it had to be categorized, it's off-camera acting. I'm just there doing it. I prepare in the same way I would prepare for any role. I learn my lines. Just a minute, please. I'm doing an interview.
Early in the shoot, we broke for lunch and we all went to the commissary at the studio. And Charlie went in wearing his rabbit outfit. And we overheard a couple of the guys in the commissary going, geez, did you get a load of that Roger Rabbit movie? That's going to be awful. Did you see the rabbit? They were looking at Charlie going, oh, God, who's going to want to go see that?
So anyway, he's sort of over there, and I'm doing the scene here, and he's doing the voice there. And we're doing this really technically very difficult thing, and he starts improvising.
Please, Raoul, I can give you stars. Just toss the refrigerator on my head one more time. Roger.
In most instances, Charlie re-recorded the voice of the rabbit in Roger, in addition to the other voices he did. But it was still used as a guide track, and in most cases when we turned the shot over, that guide track that was shot on the day was used as a guide track for animating.
Wouldn't you know? Locked.
Well, in every single shot in the film, if there was physical interaction that occurred on the set, whether minor, bumping something that caused it to move, or he ran through a window creating the shape of a perfect rabbit blasting out of a room, in any of those instances, the physical effects team had to create devices that mimicked what it would be like if a cartoon character had, in fact, been in the real room and caused something to happen.
I love to raise the pain. Believe me, it's no strain. It feels so great to scratch your plate and look at me. No pain, no pain, no pain, no pain. Bob!
Bob Zemeckis' initial vision on this picture was to take cartoons and bring them into the real world. To absolutely make you think that they believe and are walking around with you. So we had many meetings on where we would draw the line of where a cartoon ends and the real world starts. And it doesn't become real practical or funny unless they interact with something, unless they pick something up or touch something or show that they actually are doing the same things that you are. When you see doors opening and cushions depressing and they have guns and all kinds of things, the interactivity of the cartoons and the real world was like the whole key to making the movie work.
I tell you, Valiant, the whole thing stinks like yesterday's diapers. Look at this.
So there was a lot of talk about how do we get the props to move in a more realistic way. And so there were a couple of key moments. Baby Herman's cigar, for instance, was something that he always had, and we figured he would always gesture with it.
I've been trying to make him quit, but he just won't listen to me.
So George Gibbs had built a pretty sophisticated rig, which was exactly the same length as Baby Herman's arm, and it would go off to a controller off to the side where a human using his own arm would manipulate the small one.
Well, this system was developed because, as you can see, you've got 6 degrees of movement, and there's only 6 degrees of movement in anything. It looks a bit sort of crude with all these wires and motors showing, but of course when Baby Herman is drawn in, all this becomes covered behind the actual cartoon, so all we'll actually see is our cigar.
I just figured since you were the one who got my pal in trouble, you might want to help get him out. I can pay you.
For us at the time, we were looking for as much as possible how to get the real world connected with the animated world, and moving the props was key, and also key was having it done by puppeteers, because the puppeteers are used to creating the illusion of life out of unreal objects.
Well, originally I was asked in just to look at the octopus bartender scene. The animators didn't want to have mechanical rigs because they wanted the arms to be constantly moving and flowing, so they didn't want to have to paint out mechanical rigs. So they wanted an invisible man technique of moving all the octopus's objects around, like the shaker and the bar cloth, and pouring the martinis.
I mean, it was a surreal experience to watch the Ink and Paint Club in action without any tunes and just all these objects moving all over the place, you know, that represented cartoon characters.
Does anybody understand what this duck is saying?
And it was a very difficult sequence to turn over to the animators because it was hard to spot every single interactive device that Bob designed on the day and had going, but it was really you know, quite something to try to recreate that in your mind later, you know, when you went to animate it.
Shooting the live action part of this movie, as difficult as it was really enjoyable because it was working with a sensational crew of craftsmen and great actors.
It was the longest movie I'd ever worked on. I mean, we had a year of post-production where we were animating and doing ILM stuff. And remember, all of this was done by hand. All of the characters in the movie are drawn by hand. There's not a computer shot in this movie.
Well, I always thought when I read the script that you know, there was a specific styles and the type of animation that that the film should have. I mean, the best technique was always done by Disney, and the most interesting characters were done at Warner Brothers.
Hey, what's up, Doc?
And Tex Avery always did, in my opinion, the funniest humor.
Have a good day, sir.
That's what I wanted in the characters, the combination of those three.
You heard me, I said drop it.
Roger, darling.
Yes, it's me, my dearest. I'd love to embrace you, but first, I have to satisfy my sense of moral outrage.
Gun down, you buck-toothed fool! I always knew the technique was going to work because I had a great animator in Richard Williams who understood the tone of the movie, and he's an absolute genius.
The 40s cartoons, they all look like clowns. So I took the orange hair and the droopy head and semi-Bugs Bunny cheeks and Porky Pig's bow tie, Goofy's pants, and Mickey Mouse's yellow hands from the 40s. And then I thought the color, well, the thing is, I'll draw it like an American flag. This white rabbit with red thing and a blue bow tie, and it looks like an American flag, subliminally, so everybody liked it.
At one stage, when I was looking at the animation of Roger, I looked at his ears. And once I started focusing on his ears, it was like ballet. And in fact, Richard told me he was sort of mimicking the motion of these ears, sort of based on like ballet motion and movements. In fact, it was like a physical indication of the emotions of this character.
Get out of that chair!
I mean, the thing about we animators is we're observant. Our brains may be atrophied in ways, but we're like children in that we haven't lost our ability to observe.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
I think with Jessica, I think they wanted to bridge the two worlds. But they didn't want to make her too realistic, and they didn't want to make her too cartoony, so they picked somewhere in between.
Well, Jessica was hard to design because in the concept of the story, she was Roger's knockout wife. So she had to be full of dangerous curves and had to be, everything you would dream of in a cartoon bride.
I'd do anything for my husband, Mr. Valiant. Anything.
If she was real with that teeny waist and the top and the bottom, it would just fall over. I mean, it's not possible. So that's the rule with animation. You have to do what you can't do with a camera. They knew that in 1905. Don't ever do what a camera will do. So every thing in animation should have an element of impossibility, but make it believable.
Get out of here. Get me some money too.
Richard did some early tests on Jessica and looked at old 40s siren kind of actresses to kind of study and be inspired by great actresses of the period, and then was able to craft it into something that you certainly had never seen before and probably won't see again.
My offer stands firm. Think about it.
This is real important performance stuff here, because this is where he explains his philosophy.
113.
He's here full figure, and he's going, but I'm a tune. Tunes are supposed to make people laugh.
Dick would basically sit with Bob at a Steenbeck or Chem, going through the movie. And Bob would show the rough cut of the movie and explain where the characters were going to be and what the idea was.
It was very clear what he wanted. And I said to him early on, I said, look, I'll be your pencil. You know what you want to do. I'm your living pencil. Tell me and I'll draw it. So that's how we worked.
Making animated movies is like watching grass grow. You direct in slow motion, and you're endlessly giving direction to the animators, and then you get just a few seconds of the performance every couple of months. And throughout that process, you can't let yourself lose sight of the original movie that you wanted to make.
So, okay, are we all set? Are we all set on this?
There were an enormous number of shots in this film. I think it was 55 minutes of total animation, which meant if you just back-to-back put the animation itself together, it was 55 minutes. A normal animated movie has about 85 minutes. But to have 55 minutes in a live-action movie is huge.
I remember Ken Ralston saying, it's 2 years away and I'm terrified right now. And I said, me too. And so at several points I would go to the door and just yell, draw faster. So it was, that's what it was like.
Roger Rabbit was a very different animation process than a regular animated feature. We started out, of course, with a live-action film, and I would receive a stack of photostats, and basically those are black and white printouts of every single frame in the entire film, so that I can put my animation paper on top of that and draw in relationship to that shot.
And we would rough out our animation over that and shoot pencil tests on it to get the director's approval. And once those got approved, it would go through the normal steps of in-between and cleanup, and then those would get sent into ink and paint, and it was a little different because we had to layer effects elements over all of the animation.
Zemeckis wanted these characters to be very, very round, very three-dimensional. Again, this predates the computer era with round characters, and so the effects department would have to draw highlights and shadows, and each one of those levels would have to be then shot individually under the camera. So the animation cameraman would shoot Roger Rabbit all alone, Roger Rabbit as a matte, where they're backlighting him, Roger Rabbit's highlights, and Roger Rabbit's shadows. And those 4 pieces of film then would go to ILM, and using their optical printers, they would composite it then with the live-action plates.
As a company, ILM hadn't done any cartoon work, and this was a really ambitious project for us. We were much smaller than we are now. I think we ended up with having 1,004 shots altogether that came through here, and before that, the biggest show we had, I think it was Jedi, and it was around 300 or so shots.
At one point, people were sort of mumbling about, even way back then, about how 3D we could take this. Even like 3D early computer ideas, and I was saying absolutely not. Because if you're trying to make, do an homage to these great cartoons, if you take it there, you're not there anymore. You've lost it. We have to find a in-between area where we're doing some shadow work, some tone work, some things that keep them flat, but it gives you the false impression that they're actually part of the world they're wandering around in.
If you hear or see anything, beat the horn twice. Yeah, that's it. Beat the horn twice.
So the challenge basically was to try and come up with a way to make these painted cartoon characters look like they had some dimension. And the different characters, in particular Roger and Jessica, had a specific look. Jessica's dress shimmered. And these were just things, as far as optical printing or optical compositing goes, that were very ambitious for us in the sense of just both sheer magnitude and trying to come up with a look that was something that people hadn't seen before.
Get me some money too.
But really the animation process was very much like a photographic sandwich. It was where we took many different levels of animation, whether it was just the animation performance itself, the shadow mats, or the tone mats that we called them, and we experimented with those mats by putting color through them onto color film stock. And we would use rim lights, and to where the rim lights would be kind of like the light edge that would be affected by the key light, and we would use these other mats to bring out the darkness in the shadow areas to give it a sculptured look.
They had to develop a technique for compositing characters in out of focus. And that allowed us to do focus pulls from Jessica, for instance, who when she gets out of the car at the Maroon Studios and turns and looks up to the window, there's a focus pull that is perfectly logical in the grammar of film. And if it wasn't there, the audience would say, oh, there's something wrong with this shot.
So we had to figure out, with the background characters that were out of focus, what that degree of out of focus would mean. And a lot of times it wasn't putting the characters out of focus, it was the level of diffusion that we were using. So then diffusion on an optical printer could boil down to anything that diffused the light. So you can imagine, holding up a sandwich bag from your lunch in front of the light that's going to the lens and say, oh, does this look great, and having to do tests. It got a little crazy. I mean, all of us were Looney Tunes by the end of it.
Thanks. I needed that.
Another incredibly important element to this movie is the music. And that happened after the movie was sort of cut together in its rough state, that Bob started working with Alan Silvestri.
It was like the most difficult music concept work that Alan and I ever did. The score is this bizarre blend of tune music and film noir.
Benny, you go
for the cops. I'm gonna save my wife.
Be careful with that gun. This ain't no cartoon, you know.
There was a technical challenge and kind of a psychological challenge. I think the psychological challenge was, once again, remembering the idea of blurring this line between cartoon reality and live action. So the challenge there was to try to make choices that really supported that effort. We had this spectacular core jazz ensemble that sat in the middle of the London Symphony.
The music that accompanies Jessica isn't really scored. It's done, like when she walks into a room, it was that basically the jazz musicians were watching the screen and they were playing, you know, their interpretive jazz based on what they were feeling coming off the screen, and that's how her tracks were laid down. It was very, very cool.
You've got the wrong idea about me, Mr. Valiant. I'm a pawn in this, just like Roger. Can you help me find him? Just name your price, and I'll pay it.
I would like to think that the score was appropriate. That, to me, is the greatest compliment I can ever receive, is that what I did found its appropriate place in the overall scheme of the film. It didn't call attention to itself unnecessarily, but it did its job, and it provided the support that you would hope you would provide in a collaborative effort.
I had that feeling throughout that this was going to work and that it would be a real contribution to the medium, you know, certainly as far as making animation hot again.
There was something carrying us through this monster that was all good, and it turned out when it's done and it comes out and it's that popular and cool, you're going, wow, and it's such a huge hit. And what's funny too is, you know, those first sneaks, has anyone talked to you about the sneaks, were a disaster that we were at. We went to these sneak screenings in Pasadena with Roger. Of course, it wasn't finished yet. And they picked the wrong crowd. They picked like this Friday night crowd of 17, 18-year-old guys with their dates for the first run. And in the first 3 minutes, which is the pure cartoon that Richard did, which is brilliant, they got up and left.
The audience, you know, ran out of the theater. They just, they stampeded out of the theater. And you know, I remember, you know, Jeffrey Katzenberg saying, "I saw my life flash before my eyes." You know, it was like a disaster.
You know, when the crowd parts and the cards are bad, and the studio's looking for somebody, everybody gets out of the way, and there's one guy standing there, Zemeckis, and he had final cut on the movie. He said, "You know what? I'm not changing anything. I believe in this movie, and I think it's going to work." You know, he stuck to his guns.
You know, we didn't give up. We just kept, and then every preview after that, as the film got more and more complete, the previews went better and better and better and better and better until the New York Times said, "This is the biggest movie of the summer."
I have to say that we were pleasantly surprised at how fast everybody caught on to what we were trying to do, and that they totally accepted these tunes in this movie.
I hope you're proud of yourself.
Well, I was dumbfounded when I saw the completed film, because for an entire year and a half we were looking always at these rubber dolls going by and pencil tests, and you never see the finished color until the last week of the show. And so to sit there and to see the whole thing together and with sound and color, it just floored us all.
It's the Toon Patrol!
Yeah, I think Roger Rabbit changed everybody's life a little bit when they worked on it. First of all, you feel like a survivor after you worked on Roger, because it was a very difficult movie to make. And I think everybody looks at it with the same two feelings. It was incredibly difficult. I'm not sure I would ever do that again. It was the hardest movie I ever worked on, and I adored it and would never trade the experience for anything.
Gee, Pathetti, that was swell. You saved my life. How can I ever repay you?
For starters, ever kiss me again.
I love Roger Rabbit. It's odd to say this, but I love that character. It's, you know, just something about him that's really just touches me. You know, and I think it's basically because he likes to get laughs and he's got a hot wife. I mean, look at his wife, and he's a rabbit.
Roger, darling, I want you to know I love you. I've loved you more than any woman's ever loved a rabbit.
Well, I think always what the trick is to doing something that's really technically heavy is to not lose sight of trying to always have a way for the audience to identify with the movie on an emotional level. Even though it's a cartoon rabbit, the audience is emotionally invested in Roger, they're emotionally invested in Jessica, and of course certainly Eddie.
I'm sorry I yanked your ears.
All the times you yanked my ears?
All the times I yanked your ears.
When it came out, when we went to see the premiere, you know, at London, I remember it was the first film I'd ever made that my kids could see. And the cinema had all these celebrities with their kids, you know, which is pretty rare. And I think that's probably the proudest I've ever been of a movie, sort of, with that audience, with those kids. You know, that was, yeah.
Hold the work.
All right, let's try the move, man, with the playback. Here we go. Quiet.
R7TM, take 5.
And action.
Nobody move. Eddie Valiant, you're under arrest.
Cut.
Cut. Come back, Bob.
All right, that's a wrap.